The neon lights flickered outside the little diner, glowing pink and blue against the glass windows. It was late in the night, the kind of hour when most of the city slept. But Daniel, the lone human traveler, found himself walking the empty streets of an alien world. His boots were dusty from days of wandering, and his eyes carried the tired look of someone who hadn't truly rested in a long while. When he pushed open the glass door, a soft bell rang above his head. The sound seemed almost too small for this foreign place, but it felt comforting, almost like the diners he used to know back on Earth. He stepped inside slowly, scanning the room. The diner wasn't busy. A couple of aliens sat quietly at a table near the back, their heads bent low, their strange features glistening under the neon light. Another customer, tall and scaled, finished his drink in silence before leaving through the side door. The place felt empty, but Daniel didn't mind. Empty meant quiet. Empty meant no one would ask him too many questions. Behind the counter stood the waitress. She wasn't human, at least not in the way Daniel understood the word. She was taller than him, with smooth silver skin that shimmered faintly under the lights. Her limbs were long, graceful, and she had 4 slender arms that moved with an effortless rhythm. Her eyes were the most striking, large, glowing, faintly violet, watching the world with a kind of calm Daniel couldn't read. For a second, Daniel froze. He had seen many alien faces in his travels, but something about hers pulled at his chest. She wasn't frightening, though she easily could have been. She wasn't distant, though she clearly wasn't human. She simply felt different. The waitress noticed him immediately. Humans were rare in this city, and she had never seen one come into her diner before. She straightened, setting down the glass she had been polishing. 2 of her hands brushed her apron, while another absent-mindedly adjusted a small tray. She walked toward him with a quiet grace, her steps soundless on the diner floor. Daniel slid into a booth by the window. He gave her a polite smile, trying not to seem nervous. "Evening," he said softly. Her voice, when it came, was gentle and melodic. "You're human," she didn't ask. She stated it like a fact, though her tone carried curiosity. Daniel chuckled under his breath. "Last I checked." Something shifted in her expression. Not many creatures made her pause. She had served hundreds of species. Loud, arrogant traders, weary travelers, hardened fighters. But this man, with his tired eyes and small, quiet smile, felt different. He was fragile compared to most beings she saw here. His body looked breakable, yet there was something else. Something in the way he carried himself, in the way he looked straight into her eyes without fear. "What will you have?" she asked finally, though her voice was softer than usual. Daniel scanned the menu briefly, though half the words meant little to him. "What's good here?" he asked instead. That question made her blink. Most customers didn't care what she thought. Most demanded, ordered, or pointed at what they wanted. But this human asked her opinion as if her choice mattered. She found herself answering honestly. "The fire root stew. It is strong." "Too strong for most, perhaps," he smiled. "Sounds perfect." When she left to prepare the order, she found herself glancing back at him more than once. His presence unsettled her, but not in a bad way. More like the way a soft wind unsettled still water, creating ripples that spread wider and wider. Daniel leaned back in the booth, exhaling slowly. He didn't know why he felt lighter here, why the sight of a silver-skinned waitress made his heart beat steadier. Maybe it was the loneliness of travel. Maybe it was because, in her eyes, he didn't feel invisible. The diner was quiet except for the hum of neon and the faint clatter of dishes. For the first time in weeks, Daniel didn't feel like an outsider. He didn't know her name yet. She didn't know his story. But something in the air had already changed, and though neither of them realized it in that moment, their lives were about to intertwine in ways neither species could have expected. The bowl of fire root stew landed in front of Daniel with a soft clink. Steam rose from it in curling red trails, carrying a spicy aroma so sharp it burned his nose before he even touched the spoon. The broth glowed faintly as if it held small embers of fire inside, and thick chunks of root floated at the surface. The waitress placed it down carefully, 2 of her hands steadying the bowl, while another set a glass of cool water beside it. She tilted her head slightly, watching him. Her violet eyes had a spark of amusement. "Be careful," she warned. "Most who eat this regret it after the first spoon." Daniel grinned, though inside he already felt nervous. "Guess I'll find out." He scooped up a spoonful and brought it to his mouth. The moment it touched his tongue, fire spread across his mouth and down his throat. His eyes watered instantly and his chest burned like he had swallowed hot coals. But he forced himself to chew, to swallow, to breathe through the pain. The waitress leaned closer, curious. She had seen even strong warriors cough, gag, and quit after just one taste. But the human, he kept eating. His face turned red, sweat formed on his forehead, and his eyes narrowed with determination. Halfway through the bowl, Daniel paused, panting. His throat felt raw, and his lips tingled as if they were blistering. Yet he smiled faintly. "It's good," he rasped. Her brows rose in disbelief. You can still speak?" Daniel chuckled weakly, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "It hurts like hell, but yeah, I can speak." By the time he finished the bowl, his shirt was damp with sweat. He set the spoon down, exhaled deeply, and leaned back. His stomach twisted in pain, yet a strange sense of pride filled him. The waitress shook her head slowly, unable to hide her astonishment. "Already? You can do that again so fast?" Daniel blinked, confused for a moment. "Again?" She crossed her arms, two resting at her waist, two tapping her apron. Most creatures need hours to recover after eating one serving. Their mouths swell, their throats burn. Some can't even walk straight for a day, yet you sit there asking if you can eat more. Daniel laughed, despite the fire still burning in his chest. "Humans are stubborn. Pain doesn't stop us. Sometimes it just makes us push harder." Her violet eyes lingered on him. She had heard of human stubbornness before, whispered in trade routes and alien taverns. But to see it in front of her, raw, foolish, and strangely beautiful, was different. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why keep going when your body is already suffering?" Daniel thought for a moment. His voice was quiet, steady. "Because giving up feels worse than pain. On Earth, we climb mountains even when our lungs burn. We run races even when our legs ache. We survive storms, wars, disasters. Sometimes we fall. Sometimes we break. But we always get up again. Always." The waitress stood there, her chest tightening at his words. Her people didn't think like this. To them, efficiency was everything. If something hurt too much, it wasn't worth the effort. If the body couldn't endure, it wasn't meant to. But this human, he looked at pain not as an end, but as a challenge. Daniel wiped his face, then smiled at her. "So what do you say? One more bowl?" Her jaw dropped slightly. "You must be mad." "Probably," Daniel admitted. She hesitated, then laughed quietly, something rare for her. It surprised her how natural it felt. She turned and prepared another bowl, her hands moving smoothly. When she placed it in front of him again, she shook her head. "You will regret this." He raised his spoon like a soldier raising a weapon. "Wouldn't be the first time." As he began again, the diner grew quiet around them. The few other customers turned their heads, whispering in disbelief at the sight of the fragile-looking human devouring fire that made stronger species collapse. And through it all, the waitress kept watching. At first, she had been curious. Now she felt something else growing inside her chest, something warm, confusing, and impossible to name. The diner grew quieter as the hours passed. Outside, the neon lights painted the street in soft shades of pink and blue, but inside the world felt warmer, smaller, almost safe. Daniel sat back in his booth, his second bowl of fire root stew finished, his face still red and damp with sweat. He breathed heavily, but a faint smile tugged at his lips. The waitress stood nearby, her four hands busy with cleaning, yet her eyes kept drifting toward him. She was trying to understand what she had just witnessed. 2 bowls of fire root stew in one night, something even seasoned fighters avoided. Yet here sat a human, fragile by every standard, calm and smiling as if he had conquered something greater than food. She walked over with a glass of water and set it gently in front of him. "You should rest," she said softly. "Your body has limits." Daniel took the glass and sipped, his throat still burning. "Maybe," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "But sometimes you don't know your limits until you push past them." She tilted her head, her violet eyes studying him. "You're kind." "It's strange," he chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I've heard that before." For a moment, silence stretched between them, comfortable and curious. Daniel leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "What about you? Do you ever push past your limits?" The question caught her off guard. She blinked slowly, her silver skin reflecting the soft diner light. "No," she said finally. "In my people's way, there is no purpose in that. We measure strength by control, not by pain. If something is too much, it is abandoned. We do not suffer by choice. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that's smart. Humans, we suffer a lot, sometimes too much. His voice grew softer, carrying a note of sadness. But sometimes it's in that suffering that we find who we are. She lowered her gaze, his words stirring something inside her chest. Her people did not talk about feeling so openly. They valued silence, order, and efficiency. Yet this man, sitting before her battered and red-faced, spoke of pain and weakness like they were not shameful, but human. "What is Earth like?" she asked suddenly, her voice breaking the quiet. Daniel's face brightened. "Earth?" He leaned back, his eyes distant as memories filled his mind. "It's beautiful. Messy, loud, dangerous sometimes, but beautiful. We have oceans that stretch so far you can't see the end. We have mountains that scrape the sky. Forests that whisper when the wind passes through. At night you can sit by a fire, laugh with friends, and look up at the stars, millions of them all shining back." She listened closely, her chest rising and falling slowly. She could almost see the images he painted. Her world was efficient, gray, structured. Every building and street designed with purpose. There were no wild forests, no endless seas. The idea of sitting by a fire with friends sounded almost like a fairy tale. "And people?" she asked quietly. Daniel smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "People are complicated. We fight, we argue, we hurt each other. But we also love, protect, and sacrifice. We're stubbornly hopeful, even when everything tells us to give up. That's what makes us human." His words sank deep into her heart. She had never thought of hope as strength. Among her people, hope was seen as weakness, an emotion that clouded logic. Yet sitting here, hearing him speak, she wondered if maybe her people had lost something precious long ago. "You miss it," she said softly, watching his face. Daniel's eyes lowered to the table. For a moment, the weight of distance showed in his expression. "Every day," he admitted, "but sometimes you find pieces of home in places you least expect." Their eyes met then, his tired human eyes, her glowing violet ones. For a moment, the world outside the diner disappeared. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was filled with something fragile, something new. She quickly looked away, her silver cheeks warming with a faint blush. She busied herself with cleaning again, but her hands shook just slightly. Daniel leaned back in the booth, closing his eyes for a brief moment. For the first time since leaving Earth, he didn't feel completely alone. And though neither of them spoke it aloud, both knew something had begun to change. A connection had been planted between them, small but alive, like the first spark before a fire. The days passed, and Daniel kept coming back to the little diner. At first, the other customers only glanced at him with mild curiosity. A human eating fire root stew was unusual, yes, but not worth more than a whisper or two. But then he returned again the next night. And the next. Each time he sat at the same booth by the window. Each time he finished his meal, no matter how hot, no matter how much it hurt. His face would redden, his throat would burn, but his quiet smile never faded. Soon word began to spread. The fragile-looking human who could endure more than most. The stranger who kept pushing himself again and again as if pain meant nothing to him. Some aliens admired it, others doubted it, and many began to resent it. The waitress noticed the change first. She saw how other customers whispered behind their cups, their eyes sharp and suspicious. She heard the laughter, the mocking tones. And though she wanted to tell Daniel, he always seemed calm, as if he had already grown used to being an outsider. One evening, the diner was busier than usual. A group of large aliens, their skin thick and dark like stone, filled one of the corner tables. They were loud, their voices heavy, and their presence pulled uneasy silence from the others. When Daniel walked in, their eyes followed him instantly. He took his usual seat. The waitress served him with a soft smile, trying to ignore the stares from across the room. She wanted to tell him to leave to avoid trouble, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. Daniel looked tired, but there was peace in his smile, peace she didn't want to break. Halfway through his meal, the largest of the stone-skinned aliens rose from his chair. His heavy steps shook the floor as he crossed the diner. He stopped by Daniel's booth, his shadow falling across the table. "You," the alien rumbled, his deep voice echoing like distant thunder. "You are the human." Daniel looked up, spoon still in his hand. He nodded calmly. "That's me," the alien sneered. "Your kind is weak, soft, yet you sit here pretending to be more. Eating fire that should break you. His eyes narrowed. You make a mockery of us. The diner grew silent. All eyes turned to the confrontation. The waitress froze behind the counter, her violet eyes wide with worry. Daniel set his spoon down slowly. His voice was quiet but steady. I'm not mocking anyone. I'm just eating dinner. The alien slammed a heavy fist against the table, making the dishes rattle. Do not lie. You want to prove you are stronger. You want us to believe your fragile body is equal to ours. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. I don't want to prove I'm stronger than anyone. I only want to prove that I don't give up. The alien growled, his anger flaring. With a swift shove, he pushed Daniel back against the booth. The human's shoulder hit the wall with a dull thud. The waitress gasped, her hands trembling as she stepped forward. Stop, please. Her voice broke through the tense silence. Daniel raised a hand toward her, signaling her to stay back. His lip was bleeding, his body shaking slightly from the force, but his eyes remained steady. He looked at the alien, and instead of anger, there was something else in his gaze, something calm, almost forgiving. You can knock me down if you want, Daniel said softly, but I'll still get back up. That's what we do. That's what makes us human. The stone-skinned alien stared at him, confused by the lack of fear, by the lack of hate. With a final growl, he turned and stormed out of the diner, his heavy steps fading into the night. The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel exhaled slowly, wiping the blood from his lip. He glanced toward the waitress, giving her a small smile. It's okay, he whispered. Her heart tightened painfully. She had seen many fights, many shows of strength, but never had she seen someone face violence without violence. Someone meet hate with a smile. In that moment, she realized something was breaking inside her, not in a way that hurt, but in a way that made room for something new. The diner was nearly empty after the fight. The large stone-skinned alien had stormed out, leaving a tense silence behind him. A few customers whispered quietly before slipping away, not wanting to be caught in the memory of what had just happened. The neon lights hummed softly, casting tired colors over the booths. Daniel sat for a while longer, pretending to be fine. He finished the last sip of his water, wiped the blood from his lip with a napkin, and gave the waitress a small nod before standing. His body ached, and though he tried to walk normally, there was a stiffness to his steps. He didn't want her to worry. He didn't want anyone to see the weakness beneath his calm smile. When the door closed behind him and the bell gave its soft ring, the waitress stood frozen behind the counter. She wanted to call after him, but the words caught in her throat. Something deep inside her chest was stirring, a mixture of fear, anger, and something else she could not name. She hesitated only a moment before moving quickly. With long, graceful strides, she left the counter, pushed open the door, and stepped out into the cool night air. Daniel was sitting on the curb outside, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped together loosely. He looked up at the sky where 2 moons glowed faintly behind drifting clouds. His breathing was steady, though his lips still bled. She walked toward him slowly, her heart heavy. Why didn't you fight back? She asked, her voice breaking the quiet. Daniel turned his head, offering her the same small smile he had shown even inside the diner. Because fighting back would have proved him right, he said softly. He wanted me to hate him. He wanted me to show anger. But sometimes strength isn't about hitting harder. It's about holding on, about not letting hate change who you are. The waitress froze at his words. In her people's world, everything was measured in control and dominance. If someone struck you, you struck back harder. If someone tested you, you proved your superiority. To walk away, to refuse a fight, that was considered weakness. Yet here sat a human, bleeding and bruised, claiming the opposite. She lowered herself slowly, sitting beside him on the curb. The night air carried the faint scent of the neon-lit streets and the distant sound of traffic. For a long moment, she said nothing. She only stared at his hands, rough, scarred, yet steady as they rested against his knees. Finally, she spoke. My people, we would not understand this. They would say you are a fool, that you should have crushed him to prove yourself. Daniel chuckled softly, though there was no mockery in it. Maybe I am a fool. But I've seen enough hate to know it doesn't fix anything. Back on Earth, we fought wars that lasted years. Entire nations broke each other apart. And at the end, everyone lost. Everyone! She turned her violet eyes toward him, searching his face. And yet your kind survived. His smile grew faint but steady. Because no matter how much we fall, we get back up. Sometimes broken, sometimes scarred, but always standing. Something in her chest broke then, not in pain but in awakening. She had never thought of scars as strength. She had never thought of survival as beauty. But Daniel spoke of it with such quiet conviction that she felt her own carefully built beliefs beginning to crack. Hesitantly, with one of her 4 hands, she reached out. Her silver fingers trembled as they touched his rough human hand. For a moment she feared he would pull away. But he didn't. Instead, he let her hold his hand, his warmth seeping into her cold skin. The connection was simple, yet powerful. She had touched countless beings before, passing dishes, collecting payments, brushing against shoulders in a crowded diner. But never had a touch carried weight like this. Her throat tightened. "You changed something in me," she whispered, her voice so soft she almost didn't hear it herself. Daniel turned his head, his tired eyes meeting her glowing ones. "I didn't do anything," he said gently. "You did," she replied firmly, her fingers tightening around his hand. "You reminded me what it means to feel, to believe that getting up after pain is not shameful, but beautiful." The night stretched on around them, the neon lights buzzing faintly in the background. For the first time, the waitress felt that her world, the strict, cold logic of her people, was no longer enough. Something inside her had awakened, and it was because of this fragile, stubborn human sitting beside her. And though she couldn't explain it fully, she knew her life would never be the same again. The days after the fight felt different inside the little diner. Daniel still came every evening, sliding into his usual booth by the window with the same quiet smile. He ordered the fire root stew again and again, his body still suffering from its fire, yet his spirit never bending. But now, whenever he entered, the other customers always noticed. Some whispered with admiration, others smirked, mocking under their breath. A few shook their heads, unable to understand why a fragile human kept returning to face pain that most of them avoided. The waitress noticed all of it. She saw the glances, heard the quiet laughter, and felt her chest tighten every time. Before, she might have stayed silent. Her people believed emotions were private, not to be shown in public. But something inside her had changed the night she sat outside on the curb with Daniel. The first time someone mocked him openly, she reacted without thinking. "Look at him," a scaly merchant said loudly from another table, his voice dripping with disdain. "A human, sweating like a child, pretending he is strong. What a pitiful display." Daniel, as always, tried to ignore it. He kept eating slowly, his face red from the stew, but his eyes calm. Before he could speak, the waitress turned, her forearms folding across her chest. "Do not mock him," she said firmly, her voice sharper than the air. The merchant blinked, surprised. "What?" "You heard me," she said, her violet eyes glowing faintly. "Do not mock him. He endures what you cannot. He pushes through what would make you collapse. That is not weakness, that is strength." The diner fell silent at her words. Daniel looked up at her, startled, but she did not waver. The merchant muttered something under his breath and left his table, avoiding her gaze. When she returned to the counter, her hands trembled slightly. She had never spoken like that before. But when Daniel smiled softly at her, gratitude shining in his tired eyes, she knew she would do it again without hesitation. As the days turned into weeks, she found herself drawn closer to him. She began sitting with him when the diner was quiet, listening to his stories of Earth. He spoke of green fields under the golden sun, of the taste of sweet fruits after long summer days, of nights when people gathered around fires to sing and laugh. Each word painted a world she had never known, but longed to see. She told him little pieces of her own life in return, though it was harder for her. Her people did not share feelings openly, and she stumbled over her words. But Daniel never laughed. He listened with patience, nodding, smiling, making her feel safe. "You changed me," she admitted one evening when the neon lights hummed quietly and the diner was almost empty. Her voice trembled as she spoke, her silver cheeks warming faintly. Daniel blinked. "Changed you how?" "You made me feel," she whispered. "Before you, my world was simple. Work, sleep, order, control. I thought that was all life was. But you..." She hesitated, her throat tightening. "You remind me that living is not only about surviving. It is about enduring, falling, rising again, and feeling everything in between." Daniel's expression softened. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I didn't do anything special," he said gently. Yes, you did, she replied firmly, her violet eyes locking onto his. You showed me hope, my people. We do not understand hope, but when I look at you, I feel it. And I cannot ignore it anymore. Silence hung between them, heavy and fragile. Daniel's hand rested on the table and slowly, hesitantly, she placed one of her own hands over his. He didn't pull away. Instead, he squeezed her fingers gently, a warmth passing between them that made her chest ache in a way she didn't want to stop. In that moment, she made a choice inside her heart. She would no longer stand by silently while others doubted him. She would no longer hide the feelings growing inside her. Her people might not understand. The city might not understand. But she knew what she had seen, what she had felt, and she could not deny it. For the first time in her life, she chose not logic, not silence, not control. She chose him, and deep down she knew this choice would change everything. The night sky above the city was painted with neon glow and the faint hum of starships passing by. Inside the little diner, it was quiet. The waitress wiped the counter with slow movements, her eyes flicking now and then to the booth where Daniel always sat. He was there, as he always was, hunched over a bowl of fire root stew, his face glistening with sweat. But something was different tonight. Daniel was slower. His hands trembled more than before. His body, though strong in spirit, was beginning to show the cost of his endless trials. Every spoonful of the burning stew shook him, yet he kept eating, his jaw tight, his eyes steady. She felt her chest twist. She had grown used to his determination, his strange human willpower, but now, watching him suffer for the 100th time, she realized she no longer wanted to see him hurt. Finally, she walked over and sat across from him. Her 4 hands rested on the table, tense. Daniel, she said quietly, why do you keep doing this? He looked up, blinking at her. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he smiled weakly. Because every time I fall, I learn I can rise again. That's what it means to be human. Her throat tightened. But you're hurting. I've always hurt, he admitted softly. Back on Earth, we had wars, struggles, loss. We kept going anyway. Pain is part of us. But so is hope. He looked at her then, his tired eyes brighter than the neon outside. And here, when I see you, when you sit with me, that's when it feels worth it. The words pierced her. She felt her heart pounding fast, faster than it ever had. Her people did not speak so openly, but she could feel the truth in his voice, and for the first time she let her walls fall. I cannot watch you destroy yourself anymore, she whispered. Not for pride, not for strength, but if you do this because of me, because you want me near, then know this. She leaned forward, her violet eyes shimmering. You already have me. Daniel froze, his spoon halfway to his mouth. I what? You don't need to prove yourself anymore, she said, her voice trembling. Not to me, not to anyone. From the first day you sat here, I saw something in you, something I could not name. And now I know it, it is love. Human or alien, I do not care. You are mine, Daniel, and I am yours. The diner felt impossibly still. Daniel's hand shook, but not from weakness this time. He set down the spoon slowly, his eyes wide, filled with emotion. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he laughed softly, a sound cracked but warm. Already? You can say that again so fast? He teased gently, echoing the words she once said to him in shock. Her lips curved, the closest thing her species had to a smile. Yes, she whispered. I can say it again, as many times as it takes. From that night onward, Daniel no longer ate the stew to prove himself. He still challenged it sometimes, but not with desperation. Now he shared it with her. She tried it once, coughing and clutching her throat, but laughing in a way her people never laughed before. Together they found balance. The other customers watched with wide eyes as the strange pair grew inseparable. The human who endured pain and the alien waitress who found her heart, side by side, defying what anyone thought possible. Word spread beyond the diner, through the city, and soon through the colony itself. Some mocked them. Others whispered with awe. But no matter what the galaxy thought, they remained together. One evening, as the stars lit the sky like scattered fireflies, they sat outside the diner. The night air was cool, the streets alive with quiet hums of life. Daniel leaned back, exhausted but at peace. She sat close beside him, one of her hands resting over his. You humans, she said softly. You never stop. Even when you break, you rise again. I think that is what makes you so different. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. And you, he said, his voice warm. You made me realize I don't have to do it alone. They sat in silence, watching the stars. For the first time in both their lives, they did not feel alone. They had each other, and that was enough. Whatever tomorrow brought, pain, struggle, or doubt, they knew they would face it together. And in that quiet under the neon glow, a bond stronger than fireroot and fiercer than any doubt was born.